Brother Robert, this is your question. I remember this question from last night. And Brother Robert says, is it derived from one of Miller's rules to do with figures and symbols that we have a "thus saith the Lord" to connect and associate or superimpose all these symbols together on the lines as we are doing? Or to put it another way, what is our authority for associating different symbols together on the timelines? Is this derived from that rule in Miller's rules that talk about symbols and figures? So, what is our answer? Yeah, but I don't think he's asking that. I think what he's asking is, where in William Miller's rules do we find the authority to do what we're doing? That's what you're asking, right?
Well, I recently came to the understanding that William Miller's rules are more than just something that he came up with, but actually
they're divine, right?
a design thing that we're supposed to follow.
Yeah.
Before I didn't realise that, I thought it's just William Miller and he's not inspired. But since seeing the quotes from Ellen White about his rules, I realised that the rules were divine, whereas I hadn't realised that before. But because I'm not as familiar with his rules as I ought to be, I was questioning when we're connecting symbols together, like for example, the number 25, we find different 25 and put them together to tell a story.
Right.
Are we getting this principle that is allowing us to do that very thing in the first place?
Okay.
From the rule in Miller's rule that talks about figures and symbols.
Okay, let me ask a question. Are there more rules than William Miller's rules?
Well, I think the exercise that we're conducting is to verify that the rules are true, to come up with
No, that's not what I'm asking. William Miller was given a certain amount of light, right? Are all his rules valid?
Yeah.
Yes, because they're inspired, right? Sister White marks them as so. But are there more rules at the end of the world? Yes, because there's rules now for us that they didn't understand back then, right? So the question I would be to you, are we breaking William Miller's rules by doing so? Okay, right? And I would say no, we're not. The rule that we're using is the very one that I just explained to you, line upon line. And connected with that is Ezekiel 12, the effect of every vision. So if the effect of every vision is coming to pass, it means that every vision in the Bible, that means every symbol can be brought and put onto our line. No, you bring them line upon line, you lay them on top, and by context allows you to match symbols together, right? It's a divine understanding, and the Lord unlocks your brain to see those things. It's not really a human thing. If you're not understanding or receiving it, I was just speaking to a brother, you can't receive the latter rain without the former rain, right? What is the former rain? It's everything, right? If you were not here yesterday, you're not going to understand what came today, right?
Mike is buzzing, the loudspeaker.
It's a principle. It's a principle that unless you receive an understanding of one thing, you can't receive an understanding of another, right? So whatever comes before that is the former rain, whatever comes after is the latter rain. That's the basic understanding of the former and latter rain. And at the end of the world, we have a message, but in order to receive that message, you have to go back and study everything else first. Is the first angel's message the former rain in comparison to the second angel's message? Yes. Can you receive Christ's righteousness without the first angel's message? No. It's a principle. Those who failed to receive the message of John could not be benefited by the message of Christ. Right? So in order to receive the righteousness, your heart has to be broken up by the message of sin. Right? So when you follow those dictates and you humble yourself before God and seek with all your heart for Him to open your mind, He will unlock your mind. It's not a human thing, it's a divine thing, right? And then things will become clear. That's why Parminder said, the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand, right? Not by their own might, not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit. So it's a divine thing, right? So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, I have here two questions which are pretty much the same. The first one is, could you please expand on why the wise men are dying and what type of death? And the second question is, please can you give a brief explanation of what you mean when you say that the priests undergo a spiritual death just prior to the midnight cry? And I think the first question is, I don't know who wrote this down, but I think it's the same, it's a question about the same thing, about the wise dying. I will just draw it out on a line real quick. So that everybody can follow. So, Brother Jeff showed us, I think it was yesterday, that Daniel was touched how many times? 3 times. And if you remember the line, it was like this. He was standing at 9/11, and then he fasted for how many days? 21 days, right. This is 21 days. And then what happened? Gabriel appeared, right? Gabriel appeared to him and he was touched 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And Gabriel appeared to him in the Mara vision, if we read it in Daniel chapter 10. And during this time, while he was touched 3 times, he had no breath in him. So when you have no breath, you're dead. And now I just can explain how I understand it. Maybe there's a deeper understanding of this also. But when we understand from 9/11 to midnight, to the beginning of the binding off, this is midnight. This is the midnight cry. This is the hiding period. Okay? Hiding. This is, for instance, from the line of Elizabeth. She was hidden for 5 months, and then 1 month later, she was meeting with Mary here at the midnight cry. And I don't have the Sister White quote now here, but maybe I will share it with you in one of my next presentations. But she explains why there's a hiding here in this 5 months, from 9/11 to midnight, to the binding off period. And that is, she compares John chapter 12, when Christ says that the seed must fall into the ground and die in order to bring forth much fruit. So Christ compares himself to the seed that has to die in order to bring forth much fruit. But we also understand that this parable does not only apply to Christ himself, but also to his people, that is us. So also we have to die in order to bring forth much fruit. And Sister White says then the following: when the seed is sown into the ground, it is hidden for a while. And then the Lord takes watch care over the seed until it begins to spring up and bring forth fruit. So here in this hiding period, we are supposed to die to self. And when we go into the Gethsemane experience of Christ, how many times did he pray? 3 times, right? And what does Sister White tell us about this 3 times prayer he did? She says he had to pray 3 times because his humanity shrunk from the cup of wrath he was about to drink for us. So the first time his humanity shrunk and he went to pray with his Father. The second time, the same thing. And at the third time, he made the final decision to drink down the cup of wrath on our behalf. And so this illustrates that here at the third step, something happens. This is the third step, okay? This is 1, 2, 3. We understand the third step is the binding off. And it is here where our humanity fully surrenders to the will of God, where we completely die to self. And this is how I understand this. In this binding off period, our humanity is completely dead. And then Christ can fill us and we are transformed into his image. All right? Could you follow so far? Okay. I don't know if do you have more to add to it? No. Okay.
The question is the great multitude only made up of non-Seventh-day Adventists? And the answer is yes, it's only made up of non-Seventh-day Adventists. If you turn to Revelation chapter 7, Revelation chapter 7, I don't know how familiar the person who's asked this question is with this chapter, but you'll see 2 groups are brought forth to view. So if we picked up from verse 4, it says, "And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and they were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel." And then from verses 5 to 8, it lists those 12 tribes and it numbers them, 12,000 for each tribe. So verse 4 tells you that the first group of people that are identified who are sealed are the 144,000. Then verse 9 says, after this, so after that scene of looking at the 12 tribes, he says, "I beheld and lo, a great multitude which no man could number." So there are 2 groups. One group that can be numbered, the 144,000, and the second group that are not numbered. The first group are the children of Israel, and the second group, it calls them a great multitude, and it tells you where they come from. "Of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hand." So you can see these 2 groups identified. I don't have time to run through the history, but I think we all have, at least on a surface level, including the person who's asking this question, that when you see the transition from ancient Israel, when Christ separates himself from them and forms the New Testament church, how that church runs through history, through the 7 churches, finally coming to the 7th and last church, the Church of Laodicea, which is the Seventh-day Adventist church. So we are God's people at the end of the world. And everyone else is, in some shape or form, part of Babylon. they fit somewhere in the threefold union, either the dragon, the beast, or the false prophet, depending on what their location and background and history are. So there are two groups at the end of the world. There's God's people, and from God's people, who are Israel, Ellen White calls us modern Israel, or the true Israel, we understand that the 144,000 will be formed, and the great multitude are formed from non-Adventists. And if you go to James chapter 1, verse 1, this same principle is brought to view there, because James introduces his book by saying, James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. Now we need to understand that when he says the 12 tribes which are scattered, he's talking symbolically. The book of James is addressed to Gentiles. They're not even addressed to literal Jews. So he's using this term symbolically because he's understanding that the New Testament church is symbolically now Israel, spiritual Israel, and we take on that role at the end of the world. And if we go to Numbers chapter 23, and verse 9, we read, this is a prophecy from Balaam, and he says this, For from the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him. Lo, the people shall dwell alone, and shall not be reckoned among the nations. So this is a prophecy, or even just a statement at that time, about the nation of Israel. And it says very specifically that they shall dwell alone by themselves, and they shall not be reckoned or counted among the nations. So when you tie up Numbers 23 with Revelation 7, the great multitude come from all the nations and tribes and the peoples of the world. And it says that Israel is not counted among the nations. So you can see by lining up Revelation 7, James chapter 1, and Numbers 23, that the great multitude cannot be part of Israel. I hope that answers your question.
Why is Samuel Snow associated with presenting the third angel? Was this message not an empowerment of the second? This is in reference to the binding of period. So Samuel Snow discovered the date of October 22nd, 1844, when the third angel came down. This is what he found out, based upon Ezra 7:9 and several other lines of Bible prophecy. So in this sense, his message was associated with the third angel. He was predicting October 22nd, 1844. And the midnight cry was also an empowerment of the second angel's message, because part of the message was come out of Babylon. Babylon is fallen. This was their message also at this time. And this is in reference to the binding of period. I'm not sure what the question is there. This is just a statement. So if the person is here and wants to clarify the question.
At the beginning there's binding of period, 1840, and then at the end of 1844, Samuel Snow is married there at 1844. So that's really what I understand. But
Okay.
You answered the question already.
Okay. So your your question is answered. All right.
I'm going to do this in the board. somebody's asked the question, the angel that ascends at 9/11 from Revelation 7 to explain it. I'm not sure what exactly you want me to explain, but I'll answer what I think you're asking. So, Jacob's asleep and he's tarrying and he has a vision and he sees an angel ascending and descending, right? So, all the prophets are speaking about the end of the world. So, if this is truly 9/11, we should see an angel ascending and descending. Well, when we take Revelation 7 and Revelation 18, Revelation 18 marks an angel descending, Revelation 7 marks an angel ascending. They're both the same point in time. So therefore we have an angel ascending and descending. Do we have a second witness for that? Yes. Is 9/11 the cross? Yeah. Because wherever there's a rejection of truth, this is the third waymark, this is where the leaders in Adventism are bypassed. This is where they crucify Christ, because they reject the first angel's message, Daniel 11:40-45, right? So this was typified by the cross. When Christ, when he died and he resurrected, what did he do that same day? He ascended and descended, right? And when he descended, what did he do? What did he bring? He breathed upon his disciples, right? Sister White says it was like a few drops before the plentiful showers given at Pentecost, right? So it's a parallel history. It's just teaching us that history is being prefigured by the prophets. Amen? Who asked that question? Did that answer your question, Cedric?
Yeah, I didn't line it up, overlay it with previous prophecies. I just
So,
sort of looked at 9/11.
okay, so how are you to understand the truth at the end of the world?
By looking at the old.
Bring all the prophecies down. William Miller says, bring everything together, poof. And when you lay it on the line upon line, then you see all that. You've got 2 or 3 witnesses there, right? You go, wow, now I understand. Okay? Because they're just speaking as something at us in the end of the world. Amen? All right.
Okay, the next question is, are any of the Levites or the priests martyred after or even between the Sunday law, before the Sunday law? Okay, to answer this question, where the first martyrs are, I will just draw it out again on the board. So, if we go to the story of John the Baptist, he was giving a message against a false marriage, right? He was preaching against the marriage relationship of Herod and Herodias. So, at the end of the world, who is Herodias typifying? The papacy, right? And Herod is the king, right? He's the state power. It's the Protestants, the Republicans of the United States of America. The 2 horns of the United States is Protestantism and Republicanism. And Republicanism is the state power. And where did the marriage relationship between the United States government and the papacy begin on our line? 1989, right? We understand Ronald Reagan and John Paul II made the secret alliance, and the United States became the armies of Rome. So they're in the marriage relationship already here, but when we understand that, for instance, if we line out the churches here on our line, we understand from 1989 to 9/11, this is Ephesus, and this is Smyrna. Okay? from 9/11 to the midnight cry. And what does Smyrna stands for? Well, it stands for persecution, right? And according to Revelation 2, how many days is the persecution the most severe? 10 days. And where does it take place in the timeline of Smyrna? The 10 days, it's at the very end, right? So we understand that the 10 days or 10 years are here in the binding off. And where are the saints, according to Revelation 2, what does take place here in the 10 days with the saints? They are put into prison, right? So here we see that the saints are put into prison. And what did happen to John the Baptist when he was preaching against the false marriage? We understand the marriage is the midnight cry, right? So he was preaching against the false marriage, and what happened to him? He was put in prison first. So this marks this time period here where he was put in prison. And then on Herod's feast, which marks the midnight cry, where Salome, who's Salome at the end of the world? Right, the false prophets. And this is the Protestant horn, right? The Protestant horn comes to the state horn, to Herod, and makes the dance of deception. And here at the midnight cry, the decree or the oath is given by Herod to kill John the Baptist. But when is he killed? At the Sunday law. And this is how is he killed? He's beheaded. And we understand from Revelation 20 verse 4, that those who worship the image and the beast are beheaded. And this is not a spiritual death, this is a literal death, even though we know it's not everybody's beheaded, but it marks a literal martyrdom. So we understand that here at the Sunday law, the first martyrs are identified by John the Baptist. And therefore, we have spiritual persecution here, so we are disfellowshipped and persecuted and mocked at and things like this. But the martyrs, we understand so far from our lines, are illustrated here at the Sunday law. And this then the martyrdom that takes place from the Sunday law to the close of probation. And also Seventh-day Adventists will be martyrs. I think Brother Mark will show it in the study on Genesis 18 and 19. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Sister White says, at midnight a cry goes out, and it says it's in a crisis where our character is going to be revealed. And at midnight, when the cry goes out, then when we're face to face with death, then it will be seen if there's any real faith in the promises of God. Now, I'm sure I gave you this promise already. Did I give you the promise about the serpents and scorpions? Right. It says, if there's many promises, there's not a hair in your head is going to be touched. But you're still going to be face to face with death because you're going to be tested whether you believe in the promises of God. So, although he's marking the first death is marked at the Sunday law, you're going to be faced with death at the midnight cry, but you've got to then believe the promises, right? Because the promises say not a hair in your head will be touched. So are you going to fear what's facing you and trust that God's word must be fulfilled? Amen? So the fear of death will be there, but the literal death is marked at the Sunday law.
This is a follow-up question.
Okay, will there be any Levites or priests that don't make up the 144,000? And the answer is in a sense, we understand that there will be Seventh-day Adventists who will be martyrs. That means they are not among the 144,000, but they die as martyrs right after the Sunday law. And Brother Mark will elaborate on it, because it's good if you see it in the context of the whole study in Genesis 18 and 19. Okay. So be patient a little bit.
John the Baptist being one of the Elijahs and Elijah being the other Elijah combined, and then you get the 144,000, the end time Elijah. Now, would not the end time Elijah include the 144,000? Therefore, concerning that triple application, could you not say that the 144,000 includes those? I know there will be ones who were read. But the 144,000 initially could be more than 144,000 because it will include those who are like John the Baptist. That's how we understand it. I'm going to point that out when I do that Genesis 19 stuff.
We can't wait because we're all sitting there going,
The Bible tells us.
This is the question. Sister White refers to other churches who will be left praying to Satan because they did not follow Christ by faith into the most holy place. This is related to I think my first presentation. You, me, said that these other churches refer to the SDA church in our history. Why say churches rather than church if she is only referring to the SDA church and not other Protestant churches? So I just want to read the passage that I was reading from. It's from Early Writings, page 258. Those who rejected the first message could not be benefited by the second. Neither were they benefited by the midnight cry, which was to prepare them to enter with Jesus by faith into the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary. So here she's referring to Millerite history. She's talking about past history here. By rejecting the two former messages, they have so darkened their understanding that they can see no light in the third angel's message, which shows the way into the most holy place. So here she's saying that the Protestant churches, by rejecting the two former messages, the first and the second angel, they have so darkened their understanding that they can see no light in the third angel's message of 1844, October 22nd. Which leads you into the most holy place. So she's just referring to the history of the Millerites. Then she says this, I saw that as the Jews crucified Jesus, so the nominal churches had crucified these messages, and therefore they have no knowledge of the way into the most holy, and they cannot be benefited by the intercession of Jesus there. Like the Jews who offered their useless sacrifices, they offer up their useless prayers to the apartment which Jesus has left, and Satan, pleased with the deception, assumes a religious character and leads the minds of these professed Christians to himself, working with his power, his signs and lying wonders, to fasten them in his snare. So the point that I was making, firstly the point of this passage is, it's tying up the ministry of Jesus with the work of these angels. And in another statement, she talks about the comparison between John the Baptist and Christ, and the first angel and the second angel. So she's quite clear about connecting the history of Christ with the history of the Millerites. And so the only point that I was trying to make there was that we today have crucified these messages. We've crucified Revelation verses 1 to 3 because we have rejected that as a church. We don't believe that those messages have already been fulfilled, And we're just expecting and waiting for Revelation 18 verse 4. The way we process that as a church is we combine verses 1 to 4, put them all together and put them all at the Sunday law. So we've crucified these messages just as the Millerites did, and just as the Jews had John the Baptist killed and crucified Christ. And so the question that I guess the person is asking is, she makes a statement, I saw that as the Jews crucified Jesus, so the nominal churches had crucified these messages. And I guess the person is asking why I'm saying that these nominal churches are today the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's because this message from 9/11 to the Sunday law is only dealing with Adventism. Because if you want to make the nominal churches Protestantism or any of the other churches, they're not dealt with in this testing period from 9/11 to the Sunday law. They're going to be dealt with from the Sunday law onwards because they're considered part of Babylon or the world. So I hope that answers the question, whoever asked that.
So was she saying each Seventh-day Adventist church then?
She's referring specifically to the nominal Protestant churches, those churches that had rejected the message, because in this history, the Millerites hadn't formed churches. So the only churches you have are the Protestant churches. The Millerites haven't formed any kind of church structure. But we're taking that history and bringing it into our own history. And what we're saying is that the Jews rejected the ministry of John the Baptist and Christ. The Millerites rejected the first and second angels' messages, not the Millerites. In the Millerite history, the Protestants had rejected the first and second angels' message, so they could not be benefited by the third. And indeed, by the time you get up to the midnight cry, there were many Millerites who had done the same. Even though they professed to believe in the first and second angel, you see by the time of the third, they're all running away. And we're taking those two histories and bringing them into our own history. And we as a church have also crucified Christ and crucified the first and second angels' messages. We're fulfilling this history. So I'm not trying to make a point about the word churches to say, there's a church in Birmingham or London or Manchester. It's the point is we're saying is that the Seventh-day Adventist Church has fulfilled history the same way that Protestantism failed it in the Millerite history, and as the Jews fulfilled it in the time of Christ.
1 Peter 4:17 says judgment begins at the house of God. So when you look at the Millerite timeline, judgment began with the Protestants, right? And then by the Millerites. In our timeline, it begins with Adventism and then followed by the world. So when you parallel that, the churches there is referring to Adventism in our time. You just do a complete comparison. So what he's saying is bang
on. What are some ways to go to the house of Israel practically, not physically? And what is the best way to go to the house of Israel when you are trying to understand it all for yourselves? Study at home each Sabbath? So, partially this person answered this question already, because if you don't understand a message, then you don't have a message, and what are you then taking to the house of Israel? So really the first thing is to understand the message, and yes, to study it. But this doesn't mean that you have to understand everything, every little detail to give a message, but you should have a foundation. The next thing is that you really have to be directed by the Lord where to go. You have to pray, and as we understand it on our line, the time to go to Adventism, to the rest of Adventism, to the Levites, comes really at the midnight cry. God has ordained it that way. But perhaps the Lord may open doors for you now to go to certain people and share with them. But your focus should be eating the little book. And when you're doing this, the Lord will open ways for you and give you an understanding how to deal with this question. And one other thing I want to add is that Ellen White says that we are not allowed to go somewhere where we know that error is being taught, unless we know for certain that God wants us to go there. So I can just say for myself, during the last 2.5 years studying this message, that until now, or until 3-4 months ago, I was still going to my church. And my reason was that there were many brethren and sisters that were interested in this message and that were kind of open, and we had studies together. So, you know, you have to pray for that. This was really my only reason, and I think now I'm more and more convinced to not go there anymore, because they're shutting their door against this message. But as I said, you really have to pray, and the Lord will show you where to go.
The question is, can you explain the period and point in time date? Well, I gather you're talking about this one here, which we understand. Which day is this biblically? It's the first day of the first month, right? And the midnight cry is the first day of the fifth month, right? So we'll write that there, first day of the fifth month. And July the 21st was the time marked in prophetic history where they began to preach the midnight cry, right? So when you put that on a Jewish calendar, it comes to the fifth day of the fourth month. And it's no accident. You take 25 days off there, it takes you to there, right? So the Lord had already ordained the number 25 in there without us even knowing about it, right? That wasn't the first 25 we saw. It was there all the time, right? We didn't even know about that day until we looked up July the 21st. Until, in fact, it was from counting back here 25 days that came up. And then when you check it and compare the Gregorian calendar with the Karaite calendar, July the 21st was on the 5th day of the fourth month. It was bang on. So I'm not sure exactly explain. What do you mean explain the dates? Who wrote this question? Is the person here? The person who wrote it's not even here. So does anybody else have any questions on this while we're doing it? Do we understand that? These are biblical dates, right, that were marked up by Gregorian dates. And the Gregorian dates were July 21st and August the 15th, 1844. Yeah. Yes, sister. Yeah, this is a symbol. This whole thing is a figure. It's a symbol. It's a point in time, and there's a reason why it's like 9/11 a point in time. Yes or no? Is 9/11 a point in time? Yes, it's a point in time. But how many hours was 9/11? 24, right? That's what Jeff was trying to explain. But there's no prophetic need for us to open up 9/11 into 24-hour periods, is there? It's a point in time prophetically. It's marking an event that took place, right? And we have that many places. The Sunday law, is it a point in time or a period of time? It's a point and a period, right? Because the Sunday law is going to begin at a certain point and it's going to last for a period, right? But this here is a point in time. But it's symbolized by a period in time. Because we have to see and understand what's taking place in there, right? So, technically, midnight and the midnight cry are right here. All the things happened here on the line prophetically. But the Lord has opened it up to us because there's something in there that we need to understand, right? So it's a bit different from 9/11. The midnight cry, Islam's going to strike just like it did at 9/11, and it's going to be restrained, okay, and it's going to wake up the Gentiles. But there's something that's taken place there for us, the priests, that we need to understand. So the Lord's opened it up for us to see. That's how I understand it. Amen? Okay.
Okay, for the next question, I have to draw it first on the board for you to understand. It's about the prediction that we will make. Brother Jeff showed us that here in the binding of, this is also, this box is this box, okay? And this was also August 11th, 1840. 1840. And this is October 22nd, 1844. And we understand that Josiah Litch made a prediction about August 11th, 1840, about the second woe. So right here, about midnight, he made a prediction, but he made the prediction 2 years in advance, right, in 1838. So this is then 1838. And the question is now, because we read the verses in Deuteronomy chapter 2, that in the wandering of the wilderness, after 38 years, the rebels died. So here, when the number 38 is marked, the rebels died. So the question is, why is there a death marked here of the rebels, already here before the binding off? And why is there another separation taking place than here in the binding off for the foolish priests? And my answer is that we have to understand the progressiveness of these events. Because if we, for instance, look at the Millerite time period, we understand that the Protestant horn, it was given into the hand of the King of the North and into the hand of the papacy on the first day of the first month, according to Ezekiel 29. And in Millerite history, what date was this? Right, April 19th, 1844, right? So this is when the Protestant horn fell. But Sister White is clear that it took until October 22nd, 1844, when they were left in complete darkness, when they began to pray to Satan, because they did not follow Christ into the most holy place. So even though the Protestant horn already fell back here, it was not until October 22nd, 1844, when they began to pray to Satan directly. So we see here a progression in all these things. We also understand that the Protestant already began to shut the doors against the message in 1842 in July. So it's a progression. And I think it's also illustrated in this fact here that once we give the prediction, the foolish priests, they will not give the prediction. They will, right away, they will begin to mock at those who give the prediction. Therefore, they are already dead, in a sense, but the final door of probation shuts then here and here. This is a point in time. So it's finally their eternal destiny is sealed. Okay? So this is the progressiveness of the events. We have to understand these things. This is very important. So who asked the question? Okay, is it answered? Okay, all right.
This is a question about Leviticus 19, verse 27. It's not about prophecy, it's a question on dress. But it's not about dress when you see what Leviticus 19:27 is. So we'll read the verse first. Leviticus 19, verse 27. Ye shall not round the corners of your heads, neither shall thou mar the corners of thy beard. And the question is, comment on this verse. If the facial hair is not yet fully mature, is it a sin to trim the length of your beard hairs so that it looks neat and tidy without being clean shaven? The question goes on, but basically the question is dealing with, is there an issue about different type of, when you shave your beard or shave your face, is it a sin to have a shaped beard in some kind of form, like a goatee or just a moustache or any kind of combination of those? That's how I'm understanding this question. But the question was based upon a necessity for maybe a young person or someone who doesn't have a good beard, whether or not it's acceptable to shave their beard in a certain way or otherwise. But if we read from verses 26 to 28, you can see that this issue about rounding the corners of your heads or your beards is a bit more involved. It's not just dealing with that. Verse 26, ye shall not eat anything with the blood, neither shall ye use enchantment, nor observe times. Ye shall not round the corners of your heads, neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard. Ye shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you. I am the Lord. And then it goes on with other prohibitions. So if you see the context of this cutting of your hair and your facial hair, it's dealing with some kind of ritualistic or paganistic form of worship. It's all centered around that. It's not specifically dealing with how a man should or should not take care of his hair or his beard. So one thing that I would say about hairstyles and beard styles in general, obviously hairstyles would apply to both men and women, is that they should not be for outward adornment. And to me, that would be the issue that would face a Christian today, whether or not we are trimming our beards or having certain styles of haircut that are used to make us look more attractive or make people look at us, or is some kind of form of self-exaltation, which is a totally separate issue to Leviticus 19:27, because these people, as you see here in verse 28, we often use that prohibition about having tattoos. I'm not recommending that we do have tattoos, but you see these cuttings into your flesh and the printing of these marks is all related to some kind of worship of false deities. It says here about worshipping the dead. So you can see the whole context of this passage is not about looking smart or what kind of hairstyles or beard styles we should have. It's dealing with a more serious and sinister issue. But the thing that we need to consider as Christians is when we have our hairstyles or our beard styles, that we should be presentable and yet not trying to use those things to attract people to ourselves. Women are very clear in the New Testament. It talks about adorning of the hair and plaiting, etc., and women should have sobriety. But all those issues and all those principles should relate to men as well. I hope that answers that question.
Should we be sighing and crying for all the abominations in the SDA Conference Church right now, as it is written in Ezekiel 9? So, before I answer this question, let's read the verse in Ezekiel 9, starting in verse 4. Ezekiel 9, verse 4, it says, "And the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And to the others he said in mine hearing, Go ye after him through the city, and smite. Let not your eyes spare, neither have ye pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house." So, first of all, it's talking about the abomination that are done in the midst of Jerusalem, in the midst of the city. It's talking about abominations at the end of the world that are taking place in whole Adventism. It's not just talking about the conference. When it comes to the judgment, there's a progressiveness. It starts with the ancient people, it starts at the sanctuary, it starts with the leaders, but it goes through the whole of God's people. And what it means, from my understanding, to be sighing and crying for the abominations, you have to study this in connection with Ezekiel chapter 8, where it talks about the abominations. It's the 4 generations of Adventism. It's the work of destruction in Adventism since the days of the pioneers down to our time. And we have to understand how we've been infiltrated by wrong doctrine and how these abominations come to pass. And it's identifying in chapter 9 the people that understand these abominations and that are sighing and crying therefore. It's marking, right, and they're understanding the sins of their fathers, and they are confessing the sins of their fathers, as illustrated in Nehemiah chapter 1 or in Daniel chapter 9. That's what it means to understand the abominations during the 4 generations of Adventism.
Somebody has asked me, is the binding off another formalization of the message? Who asked that question? People keep asking. Oh, it's okay, I'm not trying to catch you out. That's a good question. I thought of that myself, and I'll show you why. I would say to you possibly, and I'll show you the logic behind it, right? Now, we went through the other day, we were showing that the sign of Jonah the prophet is where? Where's the sign of Jonah the prophet? Where does it begin? No, it begins here, right? This is the one that we're required to see, because was the leaders required to see this sign? Right, that was their sign. This is our sign. This is the sign for the Levites. This is the sign for the Gentiles, right? God's dealing with man is always the same, right? So, are we always ploughed first? Right, so the leaders were ploughed sometime in this time, and then there was a messenger who sees the sign here. Did Brother Jeff see 1989?
Yes.
Yeah, brought the message of Daniel 11:40-45, because that's in relation to your question, right? He was the one that formalized the message in the Time of the End magazine right here. So, did he understand the message in this time? No, if you're saying this is the Time of the End magazine, did he understand the message prior to that time? No, he had to bring it all together, right? When he understood the message, he formalized it, right?
You still have to increase the light.
Yeah, of course. Are we getting an increase of light here? Yeah, we're not dumb. We're not understanding nothing. But do we understand it fully? No, because it says it's hidden, right? So, I thought about this before, and you'll see where I'm going, right? There's a ploughing followed by the sign, right? The message is hidden, and then it's understood. So there's a ploughing here for the priests, right? Then the sign comes, the message is hidden, and then it's understood. So there's a ploughing here for the Levites, the sign comes, the message is hidden, and then it's understood. There's a ploughing here for the Gentiles, the sign comes, the message is hidden, and then it's understood. So we see the logic. So that's a good observation. I don't know, I can't say for definite that the binding off is the formalization of the message. But it's possibly correct, because remember Brother Jeff was saying about this bit that he can't verify that. He would be saying that himself right here was fully overcome his sin at 9/11, right? But I don't know, that's a tricky one. But it's certainly the formalization of the message marks the point where the message is understood. So I see the logic. Does that answer your question? Yes, Brother Robert.
That point there, just prior to 9/11, that's 1966, the formalization. Sorry, not 1996, the
Yes, 1996.
magazine.
I'm not saying
Saying
that.
that there is the formalization of the message with that magazine.
Yeah, I'm not saying that this mark here is 1996. This is marking the binding off. My sister was asking, is this binding off the formalization of the message? And I'm saying possibly. But yes, 1996 was the formalization where the magazine was put into play. Okay. Sorry. You got no more?
At the midnight cry, would it be too late, would it be late for a Levite to make it to the country on... I'll read the question as it is. At the midnight cry, would it be late for a Levite to make to the country on Sunday law? I think that's what the question is. But I think they're asking, is it too late to move to the country by the midnight cry? Is that the question? Is it too late to move to the country at the midnight cry, ready for the Sunday law? That's how I'm understanding that question. If that's what the question means, I'll try and address it that way. If we go to Matthew chapter 24, verse 15. Matthew 24, verse 15. It says, "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, who readeth, let him understand." We know the rest of the passage. It says, "This is a sign for you to and head for the mountain." So it's a bit of a study which I'm going to hopefully cover in the next presentation. But if this is 9/11 here, and we were to line up Millerite history, I don't even line it up there because it might become confusing. We've got it here. Actually, someone's already drawn it here. April the 19th, 1844. We can see here that the horn of Protestant America fell on April the 19th, 1844. And we know that Protestant America, the beast that comes out of the earth, Revelation 13, is a two-horned beast. And we can demonstrate that the first horn, which was the horn of the church, which was the horn of Protestantism, fell on April the 19th, 1844, which was the first day of the first month. And even if you don't fully understand that, you've heard us explain it to some degree at least, that this is where the Protestants finally rejected the message, and this is when the Millerites began to be separate and begin to work by themselves. And you could see that from Jeremiah chapter 15, which has been read a few times now. Because the United States is a two-horned beast, you can also demonstrate that the second horn fell here at 9/11. And this is the horn of the state or government, the horn of republicanism, because this is the first day of the first month as well. So, without spending too much time on that, what you can see is that the fall of the United States is a progressive fall. It began in 1844 and it was complete by 9/11. So this is one of the things that the church, our church, doesn't understand, doesn't accept, which is part of the problem of when I spoke in my previous presentation about why they become wicked because they don't understand, they're willingly ignorant, is we're expecting as a church that this horn and this horn, the two horns of the United States, are going to fall at the Sunday law. But you can demonstrate very easily that the first horn fell over 170 years ago and the second fell 14 years ago. So we as a church are still around this time here, we're around here, we're looking forward and we're expecting these two horns to fall here. And we're looking at something that's not going to happen because the horns have already fallen. So the reason why that's important to understand is because by 9/11 you can demonstrate that the United States of America has completely fallen. You know, even from the simple understanding of the alliance between Reagan and John Paul has already been spoken of, began in 1989, you know that by 9/11 the fall of America is complete because both of its horns have now been taken. And you can also show here that the threefold union, the dragon, the beast and the false prophet, have already been formed at 9/11, but they've been prevented from doing their work by Islam, because Islam makes an attack here. Now, if you were to go into great controversy, the first few chapters, and read Ellen White's commentary on Matthew 24, verse 15, the passage we just read, you'll know that that event occurred in AD 66, when Rome surrounded Jerusalem and planted its standards in the Holy Ground, which was the area surrounding the city of Jerusalem. And then suddenly and unexpectedly, they withdrew and backed away. And then 3.5 years later, they came and destroyed the church. And Christ says in that prophecy that this was the sign for them to flee. So you can demonstrate that at 9/11, when, if we were to turn to Psalms 48, the kings were passing by Jerusalem, ready to destroy it, and then it says, fear took hold of them, and they fled away, because the ships of Tarshish, it mentions something about the ships of Tarshish and the east wind. It's already been read to you. So you can see that 9/11 parallels AD 66, where Rome had come to destroy God's people, and they're suddenly distracted, so they run away, only to come back 3.5 years later because we've already identified this as the 1260 between 9/11 and the Sunday Law. This would be AD 66 and AD 70. They're going to come and destroy Jerusalem. So the reason so to answer the question, is it too late at the midnight cry for the Levites when they come on the scene to move to the country? You can see that the call to the country is all. This was our final warning at 9/11, and whoever's asking that question, I'm not sure why they're worried about the Levites, because people here are really priests, and if you're living in the city now, your call to leave the city was way back here. So maybe we can have a theoretical concern about Levites, maybe your family or friends, but I'd be worried about yourself if you have not moved out of the city. And if you have moved out of the city and you've got a country property, then make some preparation there so that when the Levites are called out of the midnight cry, when there's going to be an economic collapse and it's going to be virtually impossible for them to leave the city anyway, even if they desired, you might afford them a place in your country setting. But I would be worried if you were a priest and you're still living in the city and we're living here, because we had our warning sign a long time ago about leaving the cities. So if you haven't left the city, I don't know how many people here haven't left the city, you're leaving it extremely late. There's no reason that you should be in the city. In fact, you can't even give this message if you live in the city. And not to worry too much about Levites. And if you have moved out, maybe make some room for them.
But Ellen White did say there would be some people in the city. What's that about?
Working in the city, but not living in it.
Oh, working in the city, but not living.
Yeah, you're going to go into the cities and give the message, but you're not going to live in it.
Evangelising in the city.
There are some people, for whatever reason, they're stuck in the city now, but by the time you get, maybe at the midnight cry, but definitely here, if you're in the city, you've got two options. You're either going to be made a slave, or you're going to probably be killed, because there's no safety in the city. And by the midnight cry, when the economy collapses, it's going to be virtually impossible to sell your property and find a property and move out, whether you're renting, buying, whatever your circumstances are. Now is the opportunity to do that. And if you haven't moved out and you're a priest, you're leaving it extremely late, and you need to be on your knees praying to the Lord to find an opening. There are people I know who want to move out to the city. They've made a decision, and even once you've made that decision, they're finding it extremely difficult to actually do the logistical work of selling property or finding a job or moving out. So we should be worried about the priests here, because probation is about to close for the priests, and not worry about the Levites, because virtually no one who's coming to a prophecy school like this and who is serious about this message is not a Levite, they're a priest.
Someone's asked a question. It's in reference to Joel chapter 3, verses 14 to 15. So we want to turn there. Joel chapter 3, verses 14 and 15. It says, I think these verses are talking about the period between 9/11 to the midnight cry. A dark day and moon turning to blood, as mentioned, is this a sign to look for at the midnight cry? Is the dark day and stars falling going to repeat? Well, who asked this question?
I changed it to not period between 9/11 and midnight cry, just at the midnight cry. So I think the Joel one is talking about the midnight cry.
Yeah, they're both talking about the midnight cry, but we'll go there. When you go to Joel chapter 3, you've asked about verses 14 and 15, but if you go back first to verse 12, it says, let the heathen be wakened. So where does the awakening take place for the heathen? No, if they wake at the Sunday law, it's too late. Where do they get woken? At the midnight cry, right? It says, let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full, the fats overflow, their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes, in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near. So it's before the Sunday law, right? And it's marked by awakening. So we know, according to the parable of Matthew 25, we get woken up at the midnight cry, right? And we know that when Islam hits the United States, it's going to shake the whole world, right? So the heathen are woken up at the midnight cry. So, yeah, the virgins are woken up. That's the Levites, and they're going to get the everlasting gospel. But the heathen are woken, and they come and begin to inquire. The inquiry takes place, right? That's them being ploughed, ready for the Sunday law. Okay, the Lord is working with three groups of people there. He's working with the priests who are given the message, the Levites who are receiving it, and the Gentiles who are being ploughed, all at the same time. So, really, when you understand that, that answers your whole question, because in regards to the dark day and the moon, etc.,
I think he's answering whether this is literally fulfilled.
It'll be repeated, but it's still something that we're working to try and fully understand these signs. Signs are difficult to understand. Are they being fulfilled literally, and if so, why? But I think that they're also being fulfilled spiritually. But they're still something we're working on. We don't fully understand them. But they will be fulfilled, one way or the other.
It's 8:05. We've still got, I don't know, 4 or 5 questions left. Finished. Maybe. Do you want to carry on, or we can save them for tomorrow? Yeah. So let's close. Heavenly Father, we thank you for another productive day. We ask and pray that our brother who has travelled a long journey today arrives back safely this evening. Give him travelling mercies. And we thank you, Lord, for your goodness towards us who have remained here, this holy convocation. Help us to continue to honour and glorify you through the rest of this day into the night, so that we may gather once again together tomorrow. Please help the thoughts and the ideas that we have learnt today begin to be fixed in our minds, so that we might begin to have a clearer understanding of what this message is all about, the preparation that we need to make, both for ourselves, for our brethren, and for our families. Please give us rest this evening and bless us, we ask in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen.